94.4 FM, the Friday sports show, Salford City Radio. Your host is Petruzzi in the Newcastle area and around the world. And we've had some very fascinating guests on the show, world's leading sports people, athletes, people in the field of psychology, and many different related fields. Today we're a really fascinating guest. We're going to look at learning. We're going to speak to a cognitive neuroscientist. We're going to look at the benefits of lifelong learning for the mind and body and where to find source of inspiration. So Dr. Rachel Taylor, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, so great to have you on board. Can you give us a bit of an insight in terms of, just for our listeners, learning? I mean, I suppose there's this sort of perception among some people that if we don't learn at a certain age, can we learn at any point, Dr. Taylor?
We can for sure learn at any point. We can continue acquiring knowledge and wisdom and learning until the day that we die. And there's some really interesting research that was commissioned by Readly.com that actually, which states that 85% of Brits consider themselves to be lifelong learners. So I want to sort of, send out the call to action for everybody to become a lifelong learner. So next time they do any kind of research, it's 100% who consider themselves to be lifelong learners.
No, absolutely, and I echo that sentiment too. I've been a lifelong learner myself. I'm always looking for new things to learn, whether it's a course or a new skill or technique. But just in terms of, you mentioned sort of the research there, can you give us more of an insight in terms of the things that sort of people can do to learn? No, that has a knock-on effect, across a broad range of areas, mind, body. But can you give us a bit of insight of the research, please?
Yeah. I mean, the research is really interesting because, 63% of the respondents actually do learn because they know that it keeps their mind sharp. It improves the brain health, it improves the mental well-being, and they also enjoy it. And this is the thing about learning, and I want to sort of say to all your listeners, is that we're hardwired to learn. So we should be learning something all the time because this keeps our brain really healthy. And what do I mean by that? I mean that if we are improving our ability to think, the cognitive function, this actually is a neuropreventative factor, so that when we get older, we are less likely to get any kind of a cognitive decline conditions such as dementia and Alzheimer's. And, that's sort of preventative medicine. But if we're learning in the here and now, it's going to increase our well-being. It's going to increase our confidence. It's going to increase our ability to have knowledge in different areas. For me, basically, there's nothing bad about learning. And if anybody's ever had sort of a bad experience, within learning, which people often report that they do, I'd just encourage them to find a different way, find a different, way of actually learning something different, because the more that we do it, the better our brain health will be.
No, absolutely. And is there any specific ways that you can sort of suggest? Obviously, we're living like a digital age. There's some things out there that weren't around in sort of years gone by. Is there anything sort of specific in terms of, does it have to be, can it also be, I guess people want to learn a lot of different things, like maybe instrument, maybe like a new language, but in terms of sort of like learning, is there any sort of thing specific that you can sort of suggest to our listeners, please?
Well, according to the research, most people are actually enjoying to learn sort of the handicrafts, sort of woodwork, sewing, knitting and ceramics, doing a bit of cooking, learning a new language. For me, it's not so much the subject about what you're learning, it's actually that you are learning. And if people need inspiration, they can go along to the company that organised the actual research, Readly.com, and you will find every single subject matter under the sun on that platform. So you can have a bit of a dip in and out. You might have fancied once over, understanding rocket science. You'll find some resources there to do it. You might have fancied really challenging yourself to make something. You'll find resources on there to do it. And, even if it just every day doing a different crossword, doing a Sudoku, just actually challenge your brain to think in a different way. It is part of having this sort of preventative medicine. And this is what I think people need to start understanding, that learning is not a nice to have. learning is something that we should be doing. It's part of who we are. And if we lose sight of who we are, we're not actually going to be the best human being that we can be.
No, absolutely. And in terms of sort of time, I mean, would you sort of suggest people allocate sort of time? You know, I'm guessing that different people have got different sort of commitments. Some have more time than others. Some are at different stages in their sort of career and life as well. But is there sort of a time frame that people can sort of compartmentalize as a base to work with, do you think?
Well, I think, you know, starting with as little as 10 minutes a day is something good, but I think something a lot more important than time is actually consistency. So doing something consistently. So whether you choose to do it once a week, once a day, once a month, you know, whatever that is, do it consistently. But every day we need to be challenging our brain. We need to be challenging it to do something different. So, you know, we can learn in different ways. So maybe, you know, you should challenge, like, if you brush your teeth with your right hand, learn how to brush with your left hand. Do things in the opposite way. That's going to be really good for the brain. Just to challenge it, you know, out of its sort of familiarity zone every day. But like I say, the one key thing that is, and I think it's something that people do find hard to do in this day and age, is to be consistent, is to focus on something. So start small. Don't overface yourself. Don't expect your brain, if you've not had any learning for a while, to be able to go and do 3-4 hours first off. Start small. Start with 10 minutes and build up from there. And before you know it, you know, your brain will be functioning in a lot better way than it was when you first started.
Absolutely. And I mean, you've mentioned some sort of practical activities there as well. And like, what about theory as well? What's your take on like people like maybe like reading a book or a research paper or something along them lines too? Is there sort of a difference between, or do you think it may be a combination of both, learning sort of practical activities but also learning theory as well?
Yeah, I mean, God, I'm a great theorist myself. You know, I love nothing better than to sit down with a few new papers and research. I've probably told you, you know, how exciting I am. I'm sure all your listeners want me to their dinner parties. But I think there is sort of that fine line between theory and application. And as long as you are learning, it doesn't really matter. As long as you are taking on new information, it doesn't really matter. I think that the key thing is if you are not learning anything right now, that you start doing something that you enjoy, you start doing something that is fun, and you start doing something that you're actually going to go back to time and time again. And that's the key thing. We don't really want to have more pain and suffering in life. You know, so we want to start introducing the concept of learning with something that actually we associate with something that is good for us, something that we benefit from, and something that, you know, if we don't like that, we can try something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what about the rewards sort of at the end of it too? Like, you know, for example, someone might sort of decide to do a course because at the end of it they get a certificate, or, you know, the way courses are structured these days, you can do short courses, long courses. I mean, is that a factor too? Do you think the sort of reward you get as well, sort of working towards that sort of goal of completing a learning program as well?
Yeah, definitely, and I know that many of your listeners will probably have read about dopamine in various mainstream outlets. And I think people, you know, understand some, but not all about dopamine. If you work hard and achieve something by working hard, you get dopamine neurotransmitters. You get the feel good in the right part of the brain that actually is going to reinforce that you carry on, you do good work, you work hard to do something. If you achieve something and it wasn't hard work and you don't really feel like it was that great, you get dopamine in a different part of the brain that actually makes you risk averse. So I think we need to start getting the message out. You work hard, you concentrate, you focus on something, and you'll get the right kind of dopamine in the right part of the brain, which that again is a neuroprotective factor, and it will help you go through life and actually be healthier as an older adult.
You know, absolutely, and I think as well as that, you know, whilst you're sort of doing the activity too, you can immerse yourself and sort of be in that moment, and sort of it's a way of getting away, especially these days too. I think because obviously there's a lot of distractions out there, you know, that probably weren't around in years gone by. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there's a lot of social media out there these days. It's easy, like, you know, to sort of people log on from one platform to the other, really. But I think, and it's like, the time sort of goes by, isn't it? And you kind of think, what have I done with my time? But if you're learning something as well, there's sort of, you mentioned that reward factor, but also the process as well. It's useful information as well,
Yeah, exactly, and I will say it is a bad thing in terms of things. I will say that from a cognitive neuroscientific point. It is a bad thing, and we have to be aware of that, and we have to be aware of the mechanisms, and in particular, what kind of habits people are forming. And I think for me, this is one of the best kind of habits that we can have that makes us feel good in the here and now, and actually it's an investment in how well we're going to be when we're older. And I don't think you can get anything better than that.
Definitely. And just for our listeners, would you be able to signpost them to the sort of research in your work as well, if possible, please?
Yeah. People can go for inspiration. They can go and find the research and all the resources I've talked about on Readly.com. And I don't do social media, Jimmy. I'm like literally, but people can find out about me. You can find me at Dr. Rachel Taylor and just put me in Google, and my children reliably inform me. You can find my stuff on there.
No, brilliant. No, that's fantastic. And I'll definitely sort of check out the Readly. Truth be told, it's the first time I heard of it during the interview. Being a lifelong learner myself, it sort of resonates with me, but I have a big interest in sort of neuroscience myself. But I'll definitely check it out. I want to thank you for your time. It's been really interesting and informative. Now that listeners have sort of got that out of it as well. And have a fantastic day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.